Hi, thanks for watching my art tip today. Today is about unity and creating unity and cohesiveness in your watercolor paintings. And we can take a technique that oils and acrylic artists take, and that is to tone the entire background of your painting before you start painting. They can get away with that pretty easily because they can go back in and add whites at the end of their paintings, and then they'll have their highlights left. Whereas watercolorists, traditionally, and I say traditionally because it's not a hard set rule or anything, but traditionally we try to retain our whites of our paper to be the highlights and the lights in our painting at the end in watercolor. So that poses a problem for us that they don't have, and so we have three options as watercolors. We can become very skilled at painting around every bit of white that's that we want to retain on our paper. That becomes almost impossible to do, like nice smooth washes and things like that. So the second thing we can do is to retain those whites by using some kind of masking fluid, and any kind of masking fluid that's made for paper, watercolor paper, is used, and I'll show you some here. That's our second option. And so third option is to just go ahead and use white at the end of your painting. If you've missed some highlights, if you need some whites back in your painting, then go ahead and use white. White watercolor, Chinese white watercolor, you can use white gouache, casein, any of those are water soluble paints and can be used as highlights on your painting. But let me show you the technique of using an underglaze in watercolor prior to actually doing the full painting of your scene. So here we go. So here's the scene that we're going to be working on today. It's just a traditional city urban street scene. Has some cars, people, buildings obviously, and this trolley here, which is my center of interest. When I look at my painting, before I get started, I look for my whites, but also look for my lights, because there's two different things. My whites, I want it to be almost the pure paper or a pure white, and my lights are just lighter, light sky, lighter road, maybe some lights here and there that I want to remember to retain when I start to do my underglazing. So this is the scene. I've done a really simple drawing, and I'll pull this in so you can see it a little closer. Nothing detailed, just a few lines for buildings, and indicated where the cars are, the trolley is, the road, and just very simplified drawing. So once I have the drawing and I've looked at my subject and I have decided where I want my whites to be, is when I put my masking fluid on. And this is the masking fluid I used this time. This is called Fine Line Mask Pen. It's nice because it has a point in it already, and all I have to do is pretty much just draw it on with this. You can use any other kind of masking fluid. Try to use it with something like I use a plastic little tool. This is actually came from a fruit basket type thing, a decorative fruit basket, and so I just keep these little pointy plastic pieces and use them to draw with masking fluid. I try not to use my brush, any brush really. Number one, I can't get good enough control with it, but number two, it tears the brushes up, and then you have to clean them, whereas plastic, this stuff just peels right off. It's much easier. So that's just a tip as far as using any kind of masking fluid. It can be PBO's drawing gum, it could be Winsor Newton's version of their masking fluid, anybody, but just use something like this. It's kind of plastic that you don't tear up your brushes with, and it peels right off. So I've got this scene here, and I'm going to put in an underglaze that will give unity throughout the painting. I'm going to use three colors. I look at my photo or my scene if I'm out painting in plein air. I look at my photo and say, what three colors, because I try to use a limited palette when I do these underglazes, what three colors would work with this for the majority of this scene and be believable. And I've chosen cobalt blue, I've chosen raw sienna, and a permanent rose or quinacridone rose. Any of those will work. So, because I can mix the majority of those colors, and as you'll see, I'll put another layer on top of this underglaze once it's done. So this is my technique on doing it. I've gone ahead and mixed up the permanent rose, cobalt blue, and raw sienna. Now that's pretty strong. And I'm always in my sky because I do want this to be light, but I do want it to have some color in it. Let me put my glasses on here so I can see even better here. And so I'm going to wet it down, just the sky part, really quickly, because I want it to go in nice and smoothly. Don't have any little rough areas. I'll just put some quick blue in there. We'll mix it, weaken it up a little bit more. Remember, this is just an underglaze. I don't want to put or have this look like it's my finished product. Just an underglaze, very lightly. It's going to dry even lighter, remember that. At least 20% lighter. If I was using, I'm going to put a little raw sienna down here. If I was using if I was painting something larger, I would probably go in and use a squirrel brush, something soft that can get these in here. This is awful tiny painting I'm starting here, so I'm just going to use a smaller brush. So I have a little blue in the sky, a little gold in the sky. Make sure this is nice and light. This is one of those areas that I want to make it look almost white. So if I have too much, just take a little bit of that out of there. Keep it nice and light. You can barely see that I've just toned it lightly. While it's still wet, I'm going right into my buildings. And this one in the back here, of course, as things recede to the rear, they do get lighter and they get a little bluer or maybe even a little purplier. So I'm just going to go ahead and put these in right next to the sky. I don't mind that it blends right into the sky. Remember, this is just an underglaze. Okay, this next building, it warms up a little bit. So I'm going to put that in here too. And I can put some of this warm over here in this blue building. It doesn't matter. It's all underglaze. I want them to look like they go together. I'll put a little warmth in this building. A little red. And I just keep going. I'm going to put over here, and I'll put a little more blue because that's the shaded side of this building. So I'm going to put a little blue over here. Again, I don't mind that it goes right up into the sky. I'm going to put some blue down here. I'm going to paint around those cars a little bit. I do have some masking fluid on it, but I may paint around them just a little bit more. Let's put some warm rose up here in this. Okay, let's switch off and go to a little more rosy color. How about a little yellow? You can see I'm not really being careful. I'm wanting these colors to go and mingle, and I want a little bit of color everywhere. I don't want to have one building red, one building blue, and one building yellow. I want them to all have some of each. Now I'm getting down in here to where my trees are. So now I'm going to stick with my blue and my yellow. And of course they fade out into the background. They get much lighter down there. Let me mix up a little more yellow. And so I'm just going to dot that in where the trees are. A little yellow, a little blue, because that makes my green, or greenish color. This is pretty gray down. I'm just going right on down here to the sidewalk. And like I said, this will all fade away. This is the part where I'm trying to paint around a little bit. But you get the idea of what it's going to look like. And of course cool over here. Trying to get that in while that sky's still wet, because I want it to blend in with the sky. A little warmth over here again. A little yellow in the trees that are coming up here. The trees are higher on this side. They stick out over the road a little bit. Come on down the sidewalk. And there you go. There's the beginning of it. Now I can keep going. I'd go on down here, maybe go across the road a little bit. But that's how it starts. You see I've got a little pink here, a little pink here, a little yellow, yellow, blue, blue. So it's scattered throughout. And that's kind of the underglaze. Let me show you one that I finished. This is still the underglaze, and it's dried. So this is the next step. So the next step would be to, once it's nice and dried, I could take off the whites now. Actually, I probably should. I think I'll darken this a little bit so these satellite dishes that are up in the sky may show off a little bit more. But these lights on the streets here, now they can come off, and you can get a little rubber. Let me hold this so it won't move on me. Rubber pickup, and it'll just peel right off. Even down here, you'll see I have some lights in the street. People on the sidewalk, I've left a few lights for them. Maybe some signs on the poles, maybe some storefront things. So I just start peeling those off where I'm going to paint. And now I'll go back in, and they're not all done, but I'll show you, give you an example here. But now I would go back in and say, this building on this side needs to be a little darker. And I may paint around something like that. This is where also that if I wanted to introduce some new colors, this is where I would do it. Say there's more burnt sienna up here. And you think I'm covering it all up, but it still shows through. Still shows through. So you end up having that continuity that I was talking about. I see I'm going to put some blue in this to break that up. You want multiple colors. So that's what I would do next. I would come back and do my second layer, and I may not even have a third layer. It may just be one more layer of color, letting some of this show through, and then it would be finished. But let me show you a painting that I did do this way. I did the same scene. And you can see where I've added, this is a much larger painting, I've added more color in my trees, more detail in my, but this color here, this is still the underglaze showing through. This is the underglaze. That's the underglaze. I just added some of these other areas to make some more detail in the buildings. So you can see how you just, when you get this far with the underglaze, you don't have that much left to do. You just have to add your details, put your people in, and like I toned the street here. But this is an example of using that same technique of an underglaze to make continuity with the painting. And here's another scene, a much larger painting, done the same way. You can see the pinks in here, some yellows, a little blue, and you can see pink, 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 pink here, blues, warm rusty colors. So there's a continuity in the painting that I wouldn't get had I painted all these buildings individually without doing an underglaze. Hope that explains how to use an underglaze and how to get unity in your paintings and have some cohesiveness. And good luck doing it and enjoy yourself. Thanks for watching.